jumped in live on YouTube right away. Surprise everybody by being here bright early. At least one. Hey, how are you doing? Here it is. Don't be stressed. Well, whatever works for you. Stress releases all those endorphins and energy and stuff, kind of, sort of. It makes you lose sleep and lose your hair and stuff. Stress can be good, but stress can be bad. What's stressing you? What's stressing you today, Ken? Which, you mean what, the game for this class or the game for that class? Oh, so you're supposed to be done today and polishing over the weekend. Remember that? All right. All right. Well, make sure, especially in cases like this where it's the coming down to the wire. I find this is definitely one of those cases where itch has saved quite a few people's bacon, if you know what I mean. Getting a published game that works, then you remember it working as it works, as opposed to just like someone sending me a whole bucket of code that they hope works when it gets to my computer. So it's always good to make sure you have something that is actually running and working and that I can see, because that's worth its weight in gold. You know, a working product as opposed to a big bucket of code saying, there's good stuff in there. Which is not to say that there's, not value to good stuff in a big bucket of code that doesn't quite work either, but it's good to have something, demonstrate something. So start small. If you're really up against it, start with the basics and build from there. A reasonably well-working player controller that demonstrates, jumping up and down first. And then, okay, there's a little bit of environment around it that makes sense that they can interact with it. And it's got some bounds, and the player starts to develop some goals and some ideas and, kind of as to what's going on and so on and so on. So we're always start incrementally, focus on the things that say, okay, this is a game. This is a platformer. I recognize this as its goal first, and then get there. All right. One step at a time. Try to make it through as best we can. How's everybody else doing? Any other bright and cheery people? Yeah. The last week of the semester is always, I find the last week of the spring semester, as you're all probably discovering, the spring semester tends to be even more brutal than the fall semester. I think that always happens. It just feels like it's far more final because the summer is coming and so many things are sort of trying to wrap up in ways that the fall semester, it's still the same. I mean, there's no reason it's different, but just feels kind of different. The spring semester, there's so much more, and people are going to be moving out of their dorms and heading back home in a way that that next year's an entirely different year, sort of thing, kind of stuff. So it does lend itself to some different vibes, for sure. Different vibes. So congratulations, though, on at least temporarily making it through. We'll hope, I think, for the most part, everyone who is returning to class on a regular basis has nothing really to worry about in terms of overall performance, or you want to get it right. So obviously there's the levels that we have to hit, but I think nobody has to worry about real concerning outcomes at this point. I don't think. There's a few people who do have some concerning outcomes who if you haven't been following along, or if you've been if you checked out 4 weeks ago, then that's kind of the problem. Let's hope to avoid that. And let's put this pandemic, well, I don't know if we'll be putting it behind us, but we'll be moving on to a different phase of our existence after the end of this semester. But this is the last, let's see, I'm officially start at 10:10. But I woke up with a tremendous migraine this morning, and I'm finally feeling better. So I'm kind of in shock that I am actually speaking. The migraine was so bad, my wife had to take the clock off the wall and hide it because it ticked really loudly, and that was in the kitchen while I was in the family room, and I was just totally laid up. I thought I was going to be a mess. So, but after a little nap and some ibuprofen, we're doing it. I can deal with some degree of background noise today, so that's a good thing. All right, I think we're rolling into 10:10, and today again is largely, once we get past a few just reminder sorts of things, going to be, this is time to work on things, right? If you've waited the last minute, okay, work on it during this. Let me switch over here. So I've got my mess of a game, and it was funny. I was thinking to myself this morning. I'm always saying at the end of the semester, and when I posted, my latest combobulation of games and so on, I'm like, I just had, like really polished one, just like a real, one of the more completed Celeste, Super Meat, whatever, just put all my effort in and said, okay, there's gonna be like some real super polished game for you guys all to see. And I was reminded by, I was at an online lecture from a former student last night. We met with the IT and ITWS department. He's a co-founder of a little $50 million company. So he's done rather well for himself. And he's an RPI student, former, it's a real good friend. And one of the key things he was talking to ITWS students about, approaches and what you should be doing, what you should be thinking, especially at school and so on. And the notion of trying different things and being willing to fail, and some things work out. You try it, you just explore, and that's what the college experience is so much about. So I sort of think, no, I should continue to kind of show the sort of half-assed combobulation games that we kind of develop as part of the lectures as we kind of go along and try different things and explore things and say, oh, well, would this work? Would that work? Let's try a different character set. Let's do whatever. Because I think my goal, especially in intro to game programming, is not that everyone put together the perfect cookie cutter game. It's that you explore the techniques, right? That you apply the different things to, sometimes we want to have, certain core mechanics and things that work. So there's the pep talk before the final, so if you're looking at your project, you're like, oh my God, it doesn't, I wish I had more time to spend on the graphics. Don't worry about that. So it is that chance to kind of try different things. Some of them will work, some of them won't work, some of them will stand out, some of them won't. And it's the process. So I'm going to continue to publish all my itch.io, my half finished projects and so on, to kind of, let people know that it's okay. It doesn't have to be, the goal isn't to necessarily be perfect. It's to be kind of moving along that way and trying different things and saying, I bet if I did this technique, use this for this, that would result in something cool. Wind up, what's a different way to share information between scenes? Or maybe instead of having a loading scene and then I launch to an entirely different scene, maybe I should load that scene additively on top of that scene. And maybe instead of using a hinge joint for this, I should try a distance joint for that. It's always looking around to see, okay, what are the tools? Have I explored each of them? Developing that sort of bag of techniques, that quiver of different arrows and so on, and trying to try different things out. So that's the pep talk. That's where you should be at. Certainly earlier on, trying stuff out, do something different. There's going to be a million platform games out there. There's going to be a million shoot 'em up games out there. But, can you get a good, solid core basic implementation one? Yep. You should be able to do that. That's cool. And can you apply some techniques and ideas and, in different and unusual ways. Hopefully you can do that too. That's, I think, one of the keys to really being good at this stuff, as opposed to just being able to do the same cookie cutter thing over and over and over again. So that's my slow start to this morning. So on your screen right now, you'll see I've kind of still had I don't think a lot has changed since the last time we looked at this. One of the key things I wanted to do, and I think I did this more in the afternoon class on Tuesday than I did in the morning class. I figured, okay, I wanted to get my my main menu all set, right? Because this is published on itch. If you go to the gallery itch.io, you can see the near latest version of this, and go ahead, check it out. I put it there so people can see it, and it does start with the wonderful, the glorious, the main menu, right? So I had to come up with a good, I thought was a reasonable way to satisfy that requirement. That, okay, we had to have a main menu, and so I said, all right, let me go back, and we did things in such a way that hopefully the architecture was there to allow me to select all my games. I had to figure out, okay, which version of them. A lot of people ask, like, oh my gosh, can I experiment inside Unity? Can I have, like, what if I have a scene that I'm not interested in, that, where should I be trying out different stuff? And you can have as many scenes as you want in there. And in the end, it was really just a matter of choosing which of the four, the four main versions of my game I wanted to go with. And I could, you could have more sub scenes and so on and so, but they all wound up in here. And I decided to add a little bit of explanation as well. So press escape key in games to pause or return here. So that's one bit of polish. I thought it'd be a good idea to allow people to come back to this screen. So I had, let's see, for example, let's go to Knuckles Escape. And if I press Knuckles Escape, hopefully Knuckles Escape, come on, Knuckles Escape, where are you? This works on itch. Why doesn't it work here? There we go. Well, it's just Unity being slow. So Knuckles Escape is here. And it looks, kind of the same. Still doing a little bit more tuning in terms of the materials. Now our player has a physics material on it that I can kind of tune. Was that in this? We did that in the morning or the afternoon? I forget now. Where we kind of fine-tuned the player behavior by tuning the physics of the player using a physics material. Is the player sticky? Is the player bouncy? Right. So that was one technique we could do something with that. So the main thing, though, is I have this simple mechanism to say escape. And is this showing up? Okay, it does show up. That's weird. Okay, it's just because YouTube has it reversed on my screen, and I was like, oh my God, the text is missing, because I was looking at it backwards. So that's me. That's on me. I guess the headache isn't all that way. So I had this escape to continue, return for main menu. And actually reading it after the fact, I was like, I tended to want to click on this. So that's one thing I've learned about the design. Return. Okay, but return is really the return key is what I designed. So in every one of these games, there's always this hit escape and escape to continue, return to quit, or return to main menu. See, it's never the same way twice, right? But I could escape to continue the game, and everything still works. So I escape again and return to quit to get back there. Even bird boom. So we escape to continue, return to main menu. All right. And even from One Room Adventure, I think I wound up having my escape to continue, return to main menu. All right. So that was a last minute add, but it does give my gallery a sense of completeness, right? There's some consistency across it. The way that each of those games quits is consistent. Does it have to be? Maybe not, but it is nice in that I can give people kind of one general reminder here in the front to say, okay, press escape key in games to pause or return here, right? So once they know that escape key does something, right? A little bit of information I put, I kind of subversively put my email address in here because I know whenever you post your email address on the internet, some bot will come along and add you to a million mailing lists. So I decided to sort of subversively put my email address. If someone actually wanted to get a hold of me, they would know I'm amory@rpi.edu. And then information so everybody knows this is me, this is my game, this is what I did it for, this is when I did it, that sort of thing. So that was one of the big ads. And just in case, I did this in a real quick, this is proof of concept, get it out there sort of version, not the most efficient. I would go back, refactor exactly how I did this. But it is pretty simple. So things I had to make sure I had here. Let's see, my build settings. I said, okay, the main menu is scene 0. It's the first one in the list, right? It's the top of the list that is active. So the only scenes that are going to get built into the project were my main menu, One Room, Bird Boom, Asteroids, and Platformer. Doesn't matter where they are in the list. You can see some other scenes that I had used at different points, but those are the ones that are checked. Those are the ones that are going to be built into the game. So they're there when I actually go and build it. Now, each of these, this is just a canvas, and there's a button on the canvas that is using I had a little script called loadascene.changeScene, and I just give it the name of the particular scene that in the end wound up being the version I wanted to use. Right, so the Asteroids game, Bird Boom, and One Room. Now, if I wanted to, I have lots and lots of other scenes, other sample versions that I could have included. I could have said, well, okay, instead of Asteroids, I could have included Nightwalk or AI or one of those random tests. They're all still there. I could add them to other things. I could add another button and add them there as well. That's always a good possibility. But then the important part is that in each of them, I also implemented this one little additional thing, or one thing in two parts. So in the canvas of each of those games, I added a text element called pause control, or you do it one of two ways. You can have an empty object that has a text component on it called pause control. In the end, whether or not you had this hierarchy really didn't matter. So the important part is that I had a text object that says escape to continue, return for main menu, or escape to continue, return to quit. And it's just a hidden, starts off as text that's going to be hidden in the game. And the thing that actually does the work, and that could be anything. It could even be, I could put an image there or a sprite or whatever. It's just going to be something that is revealed to the player as a result of something that in the end, the game manager. So this is kind of coming back to some of our architecture. In a lot of our games, we said, okay, there's going to be some game manager object that we put stuff that's generic to the whole scene in there, right? So if there was something that would set up gravity, or it would set up something that really doesn't belong to any particular object in the world, but it was just sort of a game housekeeping thing. So decided to put escape to main menu on there, and I made it its own script because I said, okay, I'm going to use this across all of my 4 games now, or potentially even other games, or other scenes, I should say. And that object has access to one other thing, which is whatever object it is that I want to display as a result of the escape key being hit, right? So we have escape to main menu. Let's look at escape to main menu. It's just yet another simple script. And it's launching on the other screen. So let's see. All right. So let's crank up our font size here. And it has some simple things. Like I said, it's not the most efficient thing in the world. This is for proof of concept. This is going to run, probably I could optimize this from where it is, but this was the quick version. So in start, the first thing it does is that it sets whatever that object it is that I gave it, that I told it about, so let's see, hide pause message. Whoops. And this is me being half. Hide pause message first. Okay. So I'm going to hide whatever the pause message is, with an image, whatever. This object gets hidden. Right? And I also turn time scale to 1. Now, the way I pause my games typically is that I just pause physics. I decide, set the time scale to 1. And this kind of means that, okay, as long as there's anything that's based in the game that's going to run according to physics, it will be paused. So for the most part, time delta time, everything will kind of stop, freeze for the most part. And maybe your game might be different, but this is one good first try at implementing pause. And I found, given my style, it works really, really well. So for starters, I hide the pause message first, and I make sure I am not already paused. Or we'll say, make sure time is not frozen. All right, so that's all that happens in start here. And the magic, and it's not much magic, it just says, well, okay, if you go ahead and press the escape key, so in our update routine, we say if get key down, so the first time in an update message you press the escape key, it says, it checks, says, okay, I'm going to escape. I'm going to say, if not already paused, we do something else already paused. So if we're not already paused, what do? We show paused message object. We tell it that we are now paused, and freeze time. That's what I do when I pause. I show a message, I set pause just in case I wind up processing more input, because this is going to continue to run, right? Because we want it to run so that we can get the next time they press the escape key or something like that. All right. So this freezes us. And then the next time around, if someone pressed escape again, we would say, well, we're already paused. So therefore, all right, hide the pause message. Unset our pause flag. Whoa, what was that? And unfreeze time. Okay, pretty simple. The game continues to play. So the only other part is, so now I have pause and unpause. This is pause and unpause. Escape pauses, escape unpauses. Piece of cake. So the only thing I need to add is, well, all right, if I am in the paused state, I have another case down here. If the user presses return, if return pressed, I could say if input key get down and paused. I could do this rather than a cascade. Excuse me. Oh, rather than a cascaded if, I would, or embedded, or, whatever you want to refer to this, if inside another if, I could just say, okay, and paused. I suppose that just as good. Now I wouldn't need all these extra parentheses. I could leave them. They'll stay there. That's all right. So I'd say, okay, if paused and that, all right. Then I go ahead, I return to the time scale, just in case that if there's something animated, something going on, something important to the place that I'm leaving to, I want to kind of clean up behind myself, because time.timescale, time is not something that is part of the scene. That's one thing to know about. Time does not belong to a scene. So if you leave time frozen and you leave that scene, time will still be frozen, right? So it is a global static thing. Unfreeze time, just in case. And leave for for main menu. Right, leave scene for the main menu. And there we go. Pretty simple. Now I can use this. It's generic enough. The only external reference it has is going to be to this game object called, well, whatever. I'm going to allow it to set that up in the editor, right? I could look for something named. I could say, have a specific object that's named pause message or escape message. I could have been fancy and then said, okay, don't even have a public reference to that. Just say, okay, look for the thing that's currently in this scene when you start up, the thing that's going to be the escape message. That could happen. Lots of different techniques, but this is the quick one I went with. All right, so it's mostly detecting key presses. I could get fancier if I wanted to say, okay, should it be mouse click to, if you click on this object, I don't know, it could get fancy, but I went with this simple version, and it's nice because it is generic enough. I used a I used a text object on the canvas. Like I said, it could have been anything. Could have made the main character show up. That would have been silly. I could have had a graphic that was like, I have to come over here because you have to see if I had like Knuckles going like, hold 1 second, like the paused graphic, right? Could have that, that shows up and with a message underneath. That would have been kind of cool. So that's why I needed to come back over here so I could show you my do this, but as Knuckles. That's what shows up in I should do a screen grab. That'd be awesome, right? Screen grab that, and I show up like, wait 1 second, in the game, right? Could be anything, and that's that main thing over there. So, all right. So we want to make sure that you've got. Now, some of you may have, and I know I asked you not to. Wait, I have to put my. If I'm gonna emote, I have to like be here emoting, right? So you have to get the full effect, get your money's worth. So I know some of you didn't put all your scenes in one project, and for those of you who didn't do that, I'm going to ask that you at least have, for the final one, the one that's on itch.io, that there be a lobby that so when you start the game, that there's a menu that says, similar to what would have been the main menu that has that same information, right? So that you can at least demonstrate that technique. Okay, lobby screen, press a button to jump into the scene, right? So for the final one, we don't want to just dive into the scene, right? This is especially if you're going to be showing this on as part of Game Fest or anything like that. You want to have a calling card. You want people to know who wrote this game, right? That's why it's important to have that something up front, introducing yourself. So do that. Begging you, not begging, guys. What does that matter to me? It's all good. It's only points on your grade, right? So, okay, I'm feeling punchy this morning. Okay, so any questions? Throw the questions out there, right? Throw what are people struggling with, right? A few people were still discovering tile map colliders and how they work with composite colliders and how you have to make sure you check the box that says use with composite collider, right? So like in my Knuckles game here, we'll go to the main camera. Yeah, these are a good point being made over in the Discord messages. Is the game done? I don't expect really any of these to be completely done. I mean, if they are completely done, so be it. You can say, okay, I'm done with this one, and move on to the next game. That's totally fine. But it's largely, intro to game programming projects are prototypes. There's something like say, okay, yeah, this is really cool. I got some good mechanics and so on. It's done enough to kind of, you could show to somebody, someone else could say, oh yeah, I get the idea. Yeah, okay, I see that. And you could develop it more and, have a good calling card, a good portfolio kind of, yeah, I know what a good basic platformer can do. I knew what so they're all potentially, at least you want to have them showing, your path of development as a developer, as a programmer, as an artist, as a game developer. Question. Can you have tile maps act as movable sprites? Can you have tile maps as movable sprites? So in this game, in Sonic, in my Knuckles clone here, there is one tile map, one important tile map that is in fact movable. It has a rigid body. And it's going to take me a while to get there now. The game is just so interesting that it just takes me a while. And I'm going to pause the game. These platforms over here, right? And they became a kind of an important element because this is sort of one of the final secrets of the game, right? This tile map up here, it's all part of the same tile map. This one here, this sort of bluish gray, greenish, whatever. This one here, and certain elements in this, right? This here, and here, these things that block the entry, all right? They're all on the same tile map that has a rigid body on it. So if I go to the grid here, and let me find the correct one here. There we go. Tile map 1. You'll notice that's the one that's selected here. It has all the usual tile map collider, rigid body used by composite and so on. But it has the rigid body is dynamic. And how do I keep it from just falling off the screen? It's because it's using a spring joint. Right? So it has an anchor in the world that whole tile map is on a spring. And because of that, if you jump on the platform, it will bounce, and it'll bounce all of the platforms. There is some friction in between it and other colliders as well that kind of prevent it from just opening up. So even after in order to open up this final room here, you have to get these weights off of, right? I had to make the weights actually serve a purpose. I don't know. They just weight down this platform, which pushes these obstacles into the doorways. So as the character plays the game, we have to somehow either explode these or move them, carry them, get them out of the way. And that allows us then to be able to push up through here or bounce these up through a variety of different ways to be able to open up this control chamber, which then lets us have access up to the magic coin that says, yes, we won the game. All right. So in this case, the tile map is movable, right? The tile map is just like any other image or element or component as far as, it's really just kind of a graphical element. But then, it has some things you can do, like it does have the specialized tile map collider that kind of combines its physics shapes and so on and so on. But it certainly can be used as a movable object. But you remember that it is the whole tile map that moves as one. You can't really break things up easily, right? There's other features to tile map, more advanced things where you can add tiles, remove tiles dynamically through script. There are a number of projects out there that allow you to like animate tiles. That's it's one of these weird. The status of animated tiles has always been one that's sort of caused me confusion and consternation. Where if you want to use animated tiles, it's something that Unity kind of supports, but there's a GitHub repository that you have to go to get this special set of tile map tools that allow you to do that. So I've kind of avoided talking about that a little bit. I just leave the advanced tile map techniques that Unity kind of supports, and maybe they're going to get better about that as well. But you can certainly, they don't have to be static. They don't have to just sit there as static objects, right? one of my on my list of things to do is to make a whole world that is a boat and or different boats that you jump from one boat to the other boat, and they're all more complicated platforms, and they each have their own buoyancy and their rigid bodies, and you can like sail around these tile maps and move them around the screen. So there's like the sub levels actually all move within the level. So if you wind up using that, it's the greatest thing ever, and you sell 1 million copies of your game, and because you used my cool idea, just remember me. But yes, tile maps can be used in all kinds of more interesting ways. Any other questions? Oh, thank you. All right. Always a long answer to a simple question. So in the back of my head, one of the things I was thinking of doing, because someone else was talking about it, I had created this kind of rope bridge. It's not really a rope bridge. It's a wooden bridge that's connected by, uses a combination of some hinge joints and some spring joints here. And I realized that for a lot of things like this, simple distance joint would be very adequate as well. Like if you wanted to make a rope ladder or a ladder that was just a bunch of rungs that were hung together by something like that. I guess I don't know if I overcomplicate things sometimes in using the spring joints and hinge joints when simple distance joint. What I mean by that, like imagine I wanted a chain of things here, and I didn't necessarily want precise control over their yeah, of course, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a string of bowling balls, because that's the obvious thing to do. Right? So I just have a bowling ball, and I'm going to use that as my anchor bowling ball. So I'm going to add a component. I'm going to add a rigid body to that one. And that will be a static rigid body, that particular one. And I'm going to add another bowling ball. And to that one, I'm going to add a distance joint. Whoops, not that. I didn't disable gravity script. Don't want to do that. Remove. I'm going to add a distance joint 2D. And by default, it adds it to the center of the world, which I obviously don't want to do. So instead, I'm going to grab this bowling ball and say, all right, the connected rigid body is the rigid body of the other bowling ball. So now, oh, I'm doing this in pause mode. That was a terrible thing to do. Let's see. We can run over there, see what we've got there. There's also, I recently posted it, I think it's in the How Did They Do That channel, a talk that's sort of about how Jonathan Blow designs puzzles in his games. Now, for those of you who don't know who Jonathan Blow is, he's the guy behind Braid and also The Witness. And I haven't played The Witness yet. Braid is this wonderful kind of time dilation, time reversal game, and his designs are really, really cool. So you can kind of check that out. Where was I going with that one? So it's just oh yes, the point. One of the cool things about the way he designs things, the way they talk about it in the video, is this notion of emergent designs, right? Emergent designs. They don't use that term, but I'll go ahead and use it or what it means is like once you start playing with a certain mechanic, right? You try things out, you get an idea for something, how it might work. You don't design the end product necessarily. You design some techniques along the way, and you try out some ideas, and other things will occur to you as part of that. And other things will suggest themselves as part of those initial designs. And only by playing with it and giving yourself some time to try some things out, do you really, in the end, sort of discover these more interesting things. So, so now I've got this distance joint around here, which is sort of like, it's functioning a lot like a hinge joint, because it has a certain distance that it's maintaining, which is not really what I wanted. And I did it in play mode anyway, so that was really dumb of me. So let's out of play mode here. Let's put our bowling ball, our first anchored bowling ball, add component, rigid body 2D, and it is static. All right, there's our static bowling ball. Let's put another bowling ball here. And this one is going to be our one, which also has rigid body 2D. This one is dynamic. And this one, we're also going to add a distance joint 2D. And we're going to tell it that, where do all our bowling balls go? Usually they're down at the bottom. Okay, to add them to the top this time. So that bowling ball is going to be, lock that for a moment. We're going to say the other bowling ball is going to be the rigid body that I am anchoring that one to. So the distance joint is the important part. Now I'm going to say, all right, only enforce the maximum distance here. And I'm going to weight down our bowling ball a little bit more. So I'm going to give it a weight of 2 here. And for just a moment, I'm going to play the game and pause. And I should be able, let's see if I can do this. If I take this one and I move it just a little bit and I play again. Oh, I'm going to have to put Knuckles over there so that when I press play, we're not zooming back to where he is. So let's go ahead and put him there. So now, see, it falls down as because of its gravity and so on. It swings a bit there. Maybe we make it heavier so that maybe we give it some linear drag. Right now, it doesn't have much in the way of linear drag, and so on and so on. So we can tune that. Right. See now it drops down a little quicker. Definitely, if I hit it, it acts as if it's at the end of a rope there. And it's allowed to spin as well, which is kind of silly. So turn off spinning. And let's give it a little bit of linear drag. And there it is. All right. So let's make a chain of these. Right. Fun thing to do. Right. So it's this one. And I'm going to move it just a little bit. Kind of tighten that up just like that. And copy paste. Other one. Copy. I pasted another one. And I pasted another one. Now, the one thing we've got to do is we have to make sure that each of them has their distance joint attached to the appropriate other one. So right now, I think they're all attached to the same one. Let's see, this one is also attached to there. Right. So it's a little bit weird, I suppose. Well, speaking of emergent designs, right? So how cool might this be? We have a bunch of bowling balls all hanging at a different distance. And if we hit them, there's sort of a curtain of bowling balls now. Well, not exactly a curtain, I guess. They're all independent. So they're independent planets here. And you see that they don't, oh, wow, there's a tough one there. Right, so I'm up the wall. And if I hit the one in the center, that's cool. But that's certainly not like a chain of bowling balls. Now, if I also wanted, I could do things like, well, let's tag all of these. Let's make sure that we tag each of these to be the ground. And in this case, what's going to happen is by them being the ground, I'm allowed to climb on them. Right? So that's kind of a fun thing. Should have done this before copying and pasting. Or maybe these, should these be a prefab? Perhaps. So now I could climb on all of them, but I'm gonna actually wrap this up kind of quick here. I don't want to get too carried away. So I've got the bowling balls here, and the important part is that, let's see, this next bowling ball, that one wound up all the way top. So bowling ball 1, bowling ball 2, bowling ball 3. All right. So here, let's see. I'm going to come to bowling ball 2, and I have to find bowling ball 1, which was up here, and tell it that that is the one that this is attached to. And the next one, bowling ball 3, needs to have bowling ball 2 attached to it. And bowling ball 4 needs to have bowling ball 3 attached to it. All right. So now if we look at them, this one's attached to the one above it. This one is attached to the one above it. This one is attached to the one above it. This one is attached to the one above it. And this one is frozen in space because it's a static. Right. So now I have this kind of, let's see if I can jump down. And because it is ground, I can push on it. And it makes for sort of an interesting wobbly wall chain kind of thing that I could potentially sort of climb here. Bottom. I have sort of this chain of bowling balls. And if we wanted them, they could be, substitute the graphics on them. They could be planks. They could be chain links. They could be whatever you like. I didn't have to necessarily get into hinge joints, but this is I've done this with hinge joints as well. You know what? This version is actually, it's a little bit odd, as you'll see, because things sort of collapse. If I had these as hinge joints, then they wouldn't kind of collapse like that. Another way I could keep them from collapsing is I could say, go to each of them and decide that, okay, don't use maximum distance, use minimum distance as well. So if I turn this off, now this will be a little bit different. This will be more of a rigid set of connections here. So I can't, if I jump, they don't collapse in themselves, which is kind of cool. Maybe in the case of a ladder, we might want to have it work that way. So we can theoretically jump to that from, let's see. I don't want to blow anything up, do I? Should have blown myself up, thrown that, made that throw me more into the wall, and etc. etc. There's sort of a fun, I felt just like doing a rope ladder today, and so that's sort of my odd segmented chain ladder approach for the day, if you're into that sort of thing. Figure out a little bit about the mechanic now, because it's a typical grounded. How would I implement? Oh, coyote time. So some amount of coyote time. What coyote time is, for those not familiar with the term coyote time, is that if you've ever watched a Roadrunner cartoon, which I hope we all have. I don't know if we all have, but ooh, look at him stuck in there. There we go. This notion of you'd run off a cliff and you have some hang time, also known as hang time. So gravity doesn't immediately kind of react to walking out there, right? So like you'd walk out as if there was ground there, and then suddenly, after realizing that you walked out onto a thin air, then you would fall, right? That's what Wile E. Coyote would always do. Roadrunner or Wile E. Coyote, one of them would always trick the other one into running off a cliff as fast as they can through a fake tunnel or something like that. They'd shoot out the end of the tunnel some distance and then be like, oh my gosh, and then fall down. An elaborate version might allow them to run back if they realize, right? So if you ran out there and were quick enough, so gravity hasn't taken effect yet, and maybe you're running as if you're sort of grounded. A lot of different ways you could potentially do that. So it will largely depend, of course, on how your character controller is implemented to begin with. If you're using physics as much, hover boots from Ocarina of Time. That's another good one. Okay. So the question is, you want to basically turn off gravity, or in some cases, let's see, the moment you leave an edge, let's see, let's come up with a way. I have an idea of a way to do this. So first I have to look at my hero here, and also if we're working on a team, I gotta apologize to my team members who don't exist at the moment. But if I were working on a team, I'd have to apologize to them a whole lot, because my hierarchy here has been very kind of sloppy. So I'm going to take just a moment here first before I do anything else. I want to say game object create empty. I'm going to call this one BB chain. And I'm just going to put all of these bowling ball sprites down in there at least. All right. Take a moment. All right, put them down in there for starters. I'm also going to game object create empty, and this one's going to be called decorative. And all these other, let's see, all of these things here are just decorative. So I'm going to put them in decorative. So I can collapse that. Let's see, Z4 museum, that's a decorative item. Torch, decorative, right? Space, that's a decorative item. Steampunk decor, definitely, and so on, right? Go through gears. No, those are, I think that one is a decorative item. But anyway, so this way, eventually I want to be able to collapse my structure here, have a little bit more to it, so I don't just have, a big honking mess of things, right? I did have all the birds are together, thankfully. Imagine if that was. So some of these spinning wheels, trapdoors, they should all be kind of grouped together so that we see a much more streamlined hierarchy, right? Spinners, spinning wheels here. Spinners, asteroids, they're all spinning. That one, put those in spinners. All right, so it's worth doing that at some point. But we want to talk about Coyote Time. All right, so I was inspired to do that by the fact that I was like, where's my hero? So let's go back and find our hero. There he is. So the hero has on there, the most important part, the hero platform controller. Double click on that, get to my hero platform controller. I'm going to shrink down my font just a little bit here. And what typically is happening as I am going back and forth, the hero does have gravity on it. In certain cases during my phys mover, this is where most of my actual movement occurs, right? I had my jumping here. I had my reorienting, and let's see. If the player was grounded, so I have to do something to say, all right, if the player is grounded, the player is allowed to move left and right. And the question is, the moment the player is no longer grounded, for what period of time? Like, should grounding be something that occurs, or ungrounding be something that occurs immediately? Right. So what I could do, what my thought in my head is, okay, it's really about time here. So after a certain amount of time, I don't want to set, so normally I would say grounded here, right? If I'm using my ray contact, which method am I using? Ugh, too many. I'm using get contacts, right? Get contacts is what's determining my groundedness. So here in get contacts, here's where grounded is happening, right? So grounded. So rather than immediately setting grounded to false, I'm thinking that I should have either an invoke or potentially a coroutine that says, okay, set grounded. If grounded is, if I calculate grounded to be false, then I should only set it to be false after a certain amount of time. And that would be one. So I'd run out and it would take a moment for grounded. So my version of this is going to be, if you run, you can keep running. You can, your vertical motion will stick around, and then you'll start dropping. You'll lose the ability to control your vertical motion, your horizontal motion only. So how do I do that? So this will tell me immediately, this would be immediately I would become ungrounded. So I'm going to need some code here. I'm going to say, because I don't want this to be, this is potentially one where there's like a bunch of iterations here. So the moment I stop being grounded, I almost want to say, I'm going to pseudocode this here. So let's leave my normal. Note to myself, this was working. All right. That was the one. And this one here, I'm going to say, I'm going to take this again. And I'm not going to set my grounded to this. I want to say bool temp grounded. And I'm going to use temp grounded here. And do something to the effect of saying, if not temp grounded, that means, let's see, if not temp grounded, but I am grounded, or I was grounded, right? So this is saying I've just left the ground, right? I was grounded. I haven't changed grounded yet, but temp grounded has changed. And yeah, that was not necessary. Not temp grounded and grounded. I want to wait a certain amount of time and then check again, or set grounded to false after a certain amount of time. So this is the tricky part here. So I'm going to have a simple thing called no longer grounded. Works is going to be a miracle. Grounded equal, whoops, grounded equals false. Right, simple thing. That's all that it has to do. And we're going to invoke no longer grounded after 1 second. Best to get that done there. Now, I don't think I can use that just as is because I don't want this to get to this this to happen like an awful lot, right? I don't want this to happen just over and over and over again. So I want to have some sort of semaphore in here. So I'm gonna up in here. I'm gonna have a bool coyote time. Okay. So that moment is coyote time. And I'm not going to allow myself more coyote time, right? So coyote time equals false. If not coyote time, I'm going to allow myself some more coyote time. So here's where that's going to happen. Need a little structure here. I'm going to say coyote time equals true. Right, so I'm in that weird time, and coyote time is going to end when I'm no longer grounded, right? That's when coyote time, when the 1 second has passed, now coyote time is done and grounded is false, right? And the other case here is if temp grounded is, if I am touching the ground, I'm touching the ground, right? So I should have something. I'm just going to say if temp grounded, then grounded equals true. Right? It's important for me to not just say grounded equals temp grounded because that's defeating coyote time. I only want to say, okay, if temp grounded is true, then I know I'm still on the ground. So being grounded is okay. If I'm not on the ground, so I could, this could be an else here, right? Else if. So this is saying, okay, if temp grounded is not true, do this part, which is the part to say, okay, right, I was grounded coyote time, right? So I just made that a little bit. Let's see if that works. What's the chance of that sort of working? I don't know. I think that's chance. Is that even going to compile? All right, nothing happened there. Here we are. So the big question is it happening? I don't know. It's hard to say. Doesn't quite feel like it. There's some weird situations where it does sort of feel like it. I'm not sure. There we go. Now it's a good case of debugging. And let's not, our game, we don't want to go into maximize on play. And let's go back to our hero. platform controller. Maybe we'll just extend this by quite a good chunk, 5 seconds. So we're going to continue to be grounded for 5 seconds. So we're going to just amp it up. First debugging tool, accentuate or exaggerate the result so we know something's happening, right? Sort of like a print statement, but I'm going to exaggerate the results. All right. That certainly didn't feel like anything happened there. Oh, there it kind of did. That was weird. So I need a better area to start from. Now that's not a good area to start from. Did it just crash? What's going on here? Oh, I'm the game. On the scene. Whoops. We're gonna really cheat, and we're gonna put him in a situation that, yep, there. So we can obviously run off the edge now. Okay. I was able to control the direction. Okay. The reason it didn't feel like I was floating is because gravity is on, right? So I can control. I'm able to control my direction, but I didn't really change gravity, right? I didn't really change gravity. So let's make it full on coyote time. That's what we need to do. So let's make it coyote time. We're going to say get component. And normally we'd have this already set up ahead of time, rigid body 2D dot gravity scale equals 0. Okay. And then no longer, we're going to say gravity scale equals 1. So now we're going to run out there, and I'm so confident that I'm going to tune this down. All right, so because there were two things that needed to happen. I needed to turn off gravity momentarily, and I needed to let my player run as if it was touching the ground. All right, here's the test. Ready? All right, that worked. All right. Normally, I would have immediately fell. So I was able to turn around. Ready, and turn around. Make gravity. Let's look at our rigid body over here. Gravity scale set to 1. Gravity scale did not get changed there. Why is that? All right, something's wrong. Back to our code. Do we have any messages in the console here? No, no, no. So I immediately set gravity scale here. Set that to 5. Maybe I just didn't even save my script. That's probably what just happened. I probably didn't save the script. I'm fairly confident that's what happened, because that's the morning that we're having here. So let's watch gravity scale again. All right, the editor is our favorite debugging tool. Nope, gravity is still. Now, obviously I'm doing something was pretty cool. But not quite what I was expecting. You know why? There's some other gravity stuff going on. My player is manipulating gravity in another area, now that I think about it. If we look down in Fizz Mover, one of the things that it is manipulating gravity here. Okay. Let's see. Breaking my player controller here in the name of Coyote Time. All right, still works. Able to get back on there. Run out. Didn't work that time. Or it did work. I mean, I should say it did work, but if he waits too long, so we can run out, run back, you can get away with it. We run out. So gravity's doing a little bit. And how much time I have to do it. Seems like it's a little buggy. As long as I keep moving. All right, there's something going on here. Gravity scale is set to 0.1. The moment I stop moving, I lose control. So it is funny. It's kind of like Coyote Time. The moment you realize, and the moment you up on, that's when you fall, right? You end your suspension of disbelief of falling. So it's a bit of tuning that I need to do with my controller here. So, but the basic idea is there, I think, that we have. You can run off an end, and what should happen is after a certain amount of time, gravity will kick back in, which it will. Right? There. So maybe I just set that for too long. Let's go back. Yeah, 5 seconds was too long. 1 second is plenty. That might solve the whole thing. All right. All right, it works. 5 seconds was just too long. Even right now, it's probably even shorter than it is. But we get out there, we're like, ah, whew, that was close. We wait. Whoa. Boom. I got some interesting physics going on now. That's kind of cool. I like that, because what happens now if now I'm doomed. I can't get back to the wall. All right. That's an interesting dynamic. I like that. I like this a lot. I have to thank Andrew for suggesting Coyote Time. So it's not traditional Coyote Time, but it definitely has a bit of an appeal to it. Needs some tuning. So once I'm in the air, I have a moment while I'm in the air where I still have control after a jump. And it's going to affect my jumping as well, because obviously the normal jumping in, well, Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, they don't do the jumping part. So yeah, that's now my character control is really kind of wacky now in a good way. I'm liking this. It's a little floaty. It tends to stay gravity semi near for a little bit too long. But in general, it's pretty cool. All right. Jump off. We have control for that split second. Get back if we want. We don't fall immediately. Yeah, and there's going to be portions. A mechanic like that is also going to depend. You need the opportunity to exploit that as well. So let's see. I can do that. Be careful, because if I just ran off, interesting. Yeah, I can't normally control, but it is if I have been in contact with something within that last bit there. Very cool. All right. Does everybody any questions on that one? Any suggestions? Any thoughts? That's kind of a fun one. The classic cartoon trope. The laws of physics don't necessarily apply. Now, if you've still got your work cut out for you and you haven't started your game, don't worry about coyote time of all things. First get your basic movement working, get your basic jump up and down, right? Focus on the simple parts, right? Which is, can even be as simple as, if you're using, maybe not quite using physics as much, or using add force, or using, if you want to use a more traditional left and right of, setting the velocity to whatever the joystick is set to, right? But then only use, or, really enforce physics to let you use the jumping up and down. So just manipulating velocity, that's the most basic character controller. Yeah, using force, that's the more advanced one. Right. What do I mean by that? Well, let's design a character controller in under 10 minutes. Yet another character controller. And we'll have an entirely new character in our game. Let's do that, just to show that anything is possible. So we've got this wonderful sprite. And we'll just use that one. For starters, we're not going to worry about animations. I just want to talk about the basic controller. All right. Add component. Rigid body 2D. Add component. We'll use a capsule collider 2D. I like capsule collider 2Ds because they just move across surfaces a little bit more smoothly. They don't get hung up on edges. That's why we like capsule colliders. We're not going to allow rotation. So now I hit play. And we're going to see Knuckles, and our other character is going to be lost. So let's bring Knuckles up with him. So just so we can see the two of them together. All right. So Knuckles is there. Knuckles can push around Doraemon. Obviously, we're in control of Knuckles. So let's now, we're going to turn off. Can we do I turn that off, yeah, Knuckles is no longer moving. So we've temporarily paralyzed poor Knuckles. And we're going to focus on our new hero, Doraemon. So let's go real simple. That looks like a ransom note of a name. I think Big Studio is making a 2D platform in Unity would use rigid bodies so they write their own physics control and have more control. They would, as you get into, that's a good question. Very good question, Owen. Normally a character controller isn't your typical rigid body. You normally would probably be using some kind of hybrid. So just using a rigid body 2D, not as is. That's why you always have a character controller. In 3D, Unity actually builds and provides a 3D character controller for you, right? Which is, again, it's sort of a hybrid. It uses the physics system, it uses colliders, it uses all sorts of things, but it's not just using the rigid body. It may use the rigid body to give the player, weight and interact with the environment, but it's not really the primary means of controlling the player, right? So you'll typically see a character controller will kind of start off as being, some sort of, either use a simple rigid body and then things on top of that, or, use some kind of, you can even get away with, transform, translate, and colliders and so on for starters, as long as they have a rigid body on them. But they're hybrids. So you'll use the rigid body for certain things like managing kind of the collider and the relationship and the physics when you want it to, but then you'll have other stuff in your custom controller. So there's always a custom controller. How much do they use the rigid body in there? Maybe they use the rigid body as a kinetic rigid body, right? So sometimes you'll be using that just for, positioning and so on, and not the actual physics simulation. So there's also the sort of hybrid between a kinematic controller and a dynamic controller. Yeah, it depends. You can do a lot. You'll find yourself tweaking more and more and more about what the rigid body is doing, or controlling and manipulating it. Obviously, in the real world, we're subject to dynamics, right? We move around in space. We are subject to that, but we have intelligent control over that. We can apply forces. We have, doing certain things. We fight physics all the time. So character control is all about, in the real world, it's all about fighting physics. How much you want to embrace or fight physics in your game, that's up to you, right? So yes, they would. So do I think they use this or that? Yes, they do this or that. No, they do both. Right? There's no reason to totally abandon the physics engine, but you're going to need to script things more tightly to give you the feel that you want it to have, right? So I think Brackeys has a good, writing a character controller, and that's their version. I remember when I first started programming Unity, I heard everybody talking about character controllers, and they go, "Get a character controller." So I was like searching around, where's the character controller? Where's the character controller, built in here? Why can't I just type character controller? I'm like, oh wait, there is a character controller, but that's a 3D character controller, right? And in 2D, you basically have to write your own, right? So you'll notice it immediately also said the thing that bothered it about adding this character controller was it actually had a rigid body 2D on it. So even though it's the built-in character controller, it's this kind of weird hybrid of rigid body and scripted motion, right? We in Game Dev 1, we'll talk about that. We'll actually show, and you'll likely use the character controller in Game Dev 1 in Unity, and the version of that Unreal has as well, right? And the assumption about those, actually, I think I have a video. If you go over to extras, did I put that in there? Yes. Let's bring this over here. 3D platformer basics, character controller and animator layers. This is a video I did. When did I do that? It was last semester, one of the previous semesters, and it is a roughly, I think it is wound up being a whole hour or so. And well, I'm listening to myself and talking at the same time. And this is a bit of a demonstration of the 3D camera controller and some 3D objects. So if you want, this is the crazy bonus thing. All right, if you have time, if you're already done with your project or over the summer, you want to check into this stuff, this is one bit of additional, another lecture that you get from me for free, bonus. But don't worry about it. Get your current platformer done, right? In the last some of the last remote classes, we wound up, I think I tried to put too much additional material in, and the final projects kind of suffered from that. So I've kind of avoided some of the 3D stuff, or downplayed a little bit this semester to kind of focus on people getting their platformers in. So if you do find in other semesters I had a little bit more stuff at the end, those videos are out there. Anyway, you can check those out. So this was a little a character, supposed to be a dog knight. The way its ears were kind of convinced me is a little bit more of a cat. And I built a little mesh world that it could walk and run around in and jump off of things and jump from platform to platform. And the techniques are largely the same. Once you get the platformer, you have your assets, you would be attaching a controller, then you wander around, you have colliders. In some ways, it's nice to not do 3D first, because in 3D people want to have more stuff done for them, right? You have the generic character controller you just get and you just use a lot of the time, and without really kind of understanding what the issues were, or what it's like to build your own, or how do you interact with physics, and how are you manipulating all these different things. If you dive right into 3D at first, you'll tend to use a lot more stuff right out of the box, because it's more complicated and you don't want to reinvent that necessarily. So that's that. Again, a long answer to a simple question. But a well-tuned, well-written, interesting character controller is going to be the sort of thing that really makes or breaks a game, or can make or break a game. Because it gives it that character, gives it that feel, gives it that thing. I mean, Sonic's character controller, Sonic's control versus Mario's, entirely different sort of thing, right? They feel different. Sonic is quick and nimble and fast and physics driven and so on. Mario is just, Mario plods around, does his thing. Yeah. So let's get back to here real quick. Question. Sam asked, so is Game Dev 1 more about 3D game development? Certainly, yes. In Game Dev 1, we do 3 major projects in Game Dev 1, and you do them as groups. So you have more resources, and you'll have people who will specialize in art, people who specialize in narrative and level design and programming and sound and so on, right? So you have a team anywhere from 4 to 6. We try to get 4 to 6 people per team. And we cover 3 different engines. We do Unity again, but we do Unity in 3D. So we recommend you doing a Unity 3D game, an Unreal 3D game, because Unreal really is, Unreal is fantastic. The Unreal Engine is amazing, but to my point before about you tending to do things a certain way, and it being very, there's lots and lots of stuff done for you, lots and lots of stuff built in. It is a very, very complete, very complex. It's every first-person shooter, that sort of game. That's what Unreal does, and it does it extremely, extremely well. But you're going to wind up, Unreal games look more like, you say, oh, that's an Unreal game, as opposed to Unity. You're like, oh, was it 2D? Was it 3D? Was it a hyper? Was it texture? Was it a bit? So you almost have to do a certain type of 3D game in Unreal. It just makes sense to do it. That's what most people wind up doing. Unity, you do another a game of your choice. You get to design. You decide, is it a platform or is it a whatever. It doesn't have to be any of the normal cliches. And before I go to the next question, and then the third engine we have been using. We switched a while ago. We were using. Well, let me switch to. Let me at least be on the screen here. Which external camera should I use? That's good enough. We'll use this one. We used to use more of a web-based bucket of JavaScript engine. The name is escaping me at the moment, but we switched from that to use the Godot engine, or Godot engine. I forget which way it's pronounced now, which is an open source, really good engine. It tends to be a little bit more 2D, or people think of it as being more 2D than 3D, but it can also, it's kind of a, I don't want to say it's halfway between Unity and Unreal, because that's not exactly true. Phaser, we used to do Phaser. That's right. And Phaser, we got really, really mixed results and mixed reactions from people using Phaser. Phaser's a little bit, there's two versions of Phaser and a lot of examples, and it's just not as well supported. It's an interesting idea, but we don't do Phaser anymore just because it's kind of nuts. Godot, on the other hand, Godot is really cool, and it's worth knowing and kind of tackling things in a variety of engines, so you get the feeling for them. So you typically do 1 2D game and 2 3D games. That's negotiable, but that's kind of how it usually works out. It's also nicer because by that point, hopefully people feel a little bit more comfortable with, the artists, especially who have been working on 3D things. You have a little bit more stuff behind you, and then we have to do some things like with rigging and animation, how they work together. They're certainly more complicated in 3D than they are in 2D. We're not talking about flip books anymore. So that's that. So Benny asked, taking C++ summer course as a computer science course, does that help with Unreal? Yes, it can. In Unreal, you have two choices. Just like in Unity, you have the choice. Most people still use C# for scripting, but there's more, more and more behind Bolt. And that's why I like to talk about Bolt and introduce you to it. So fewer people use Bolt, but in Unreal, it tends to flip the other way, because blueprints have been part of Unreal for much longer, and they're much more, they're a more mature part of Unreal than Bolt is in Unity. C# is easier, or people tend to pick up C# easier than C++. C++ is a little bit more, I don't know. I started in C a long time ago, so I'm okay with either one. I go back and forth in every half an hour or so. I switch between C# and C++. So I don't find it that different, but some people find C++ to be a lot more challenging than C#. So you tend to wind up doing, on Unreal, you doing your more hardcore things in C++ and using blueprints a lot more for general things. It's almost assumed that if you go to a studio using Unreal, that you're going to know blueprints. Whereas if you go to a studio that uses Unity, you're going to be assumed that you know C# and maybe you know Bolt. Unreal developers, the ones worth their weight in gold are the ones who are going to know blueprints and C++. But it's sort of a given that you're going to know how to use blueprints when you're using Unreal. That's my experience of talking to people and seeing where it's used and so on. It's since, yeah. Joseph is saying about C++ versus C#. Yeah, C# is more friendly, especially with regards to memory management and pointers and new and all those sorts of things. It is C++ is lower level. It certainly was not designed as a scripting language, whereas C# was Microsoft's answer to sort of Java and some kind of higher level frameworks and so on. So that's a whole thing. We can get into debates on programming languages. Happy to talk about all the way down to assembly language. Yes, I'm one of those people who wound up, I've done a whole lot of assembly language programming. 50% of the programming I did on the Sega Saturn was straight SH2 programming, SH2 assembly language. Same, I did SH4 on the Dreamcast, a whole bunch of Silicon Graphics assembly language and all that. So yeah, been there, done that, and had to debug a whole lot of x86 stuff. I didn't write much x86 from scratch. I used a lot of other people's and optimized their code, but I didn't tend to write that stuff from scratch. A lot of 68,000 assembly code too. Dying art, right? But somebody's got to do it. So yes, the best thing you can do is not get too much of an attitude about programming languages. Some people do. They want to invent their own. Jonathan Blow, again. Jonathan Blow of fame, Braid and The Witness and so on, is coming up with his own language, which looks very, very interesting. It's called Jai, Jai, which is really interesting, but I don't think it's available to anyone to really work with yet other than his company, but has some very interesting, attractive features. But anytime someone says, I'm inventing a new language because I know better than everybody else. Okay. I'm excited to see it though. I'd like to, I like new things, and there's some very cool things about the way the compiler works quite differently than most compilers, and the efficiency and the way it loads and so on. Very cool. So, okay. Any other questions about Game Dev 1 or Intro to Game Programming? This is a good opportunity to say, okay, what should you do over the summer once you finish your projects, as you prepare yourself for Game Dev 1? If you are inclined to, artists, you should be working in Maya and kind of the tools that you're going to be expected to have for, large studios, if that's what you're into, and certainly we teach our course that way. I like to say to programmers, if you're CS majors or you're, people who are more dabbling in 3D, Blender is a fantastic, fantastic tool. I usually work in Blender. I'm not a Maya person in a long time. Last version of Maya, I probably was running on a Silicon Graphics machine or something like that. But I like Blender a lot, and it's great. Try to do a little bit of 3D modeling, some really bad 3D modeling, and look into skeletons and rigging and things like that, and find a cool bunch of tutorials on YouTube. Infenzia, that's a word you should know. I think that's his name. Infenzia is a YouTuber who used to do game music, and he does, how to model and rig a character in Blender in 10 minutes and then import it into Unity for 3D. So that's kind of a cool thing. And it gives you a good appreciation for kind of the pipeline of going through, creating a model, rigging a model, bringing it into Unity, how you animate it in Unity, and so on. Great background appreciation for people who don't want to be necessarily experts at 3D modeling and animation, but want to know, experience what it is for the whole pipeline, right? Yes, if you've got the opportunity, if you can work in Maya, by all means do. Happy to talk about, some of the conceptual differences and some of those. Yeah, the cool thing about Blender, it's kind of an all-in-one solution. Whereas like Maya, then you want to talk about Substance Painter, and you want to talk about 3ds Max. They all there's an ecosystem to the real heavy lifting tools. There's more and more specialty in those tools about what they really do and how industrial strength they are. The cool thing about Blender is it just has it'll give you a taste of everything. And more, it's doing it in impressive ways. So it's certainly capable of, AA, if not AAA level results, if you have the time to put into it. But it's a different, we always talk about pipelines. Open source is cool as well. It's free. It's nothing. Blender is very accessible. There used to be, once upon a time, Blender had its own game engine that was built in as well. And that's been abandoned for quite a while. I still have I think I recycled those books. There was a Blender game engine, which was kind of cool. Talk about trying to do everything across the whole spectrum. So yeah, if you have some time over the summer and you're not normally inclined to develop, if you're not going to go the whole Maya route, take some time, check out Blender. You'll appreciate more what's going on in Maya and understand the people who are doing, creating the assets and what the limitations are and all that as a result of that. Yes. Okay. Ask me anything. I guess this is the ask me anything portion. Should I go back to my character controller while I'll just do one of those YouTube channels where I'm just going to like draw while talking, and instead of drawing, I'll write a character controller or something like that. See if I can do that. That means I should turn my camera on. Can I do that? Whoops. I'm trying to put my camera on my other screen. I don't know why it's in the background there. Oh, it's just way too big. Oh, what time is it? I don't even know what time it is. You guys, everyone's got to be distracted. 11:47. We're done. We're practically done. We have 13 minutes. Any more ducks? Let's see. I think the only other duck, is that the duck? Yeah, I do have an Aflac duck. So once you start collecting ducks, everybody gives you ducks and you find ducks. So yeah, if you look up the Duck Corporation, that is the company I worked with that we started, that eventually became Onto, that eventually was bought by Google. I don't know how much of that story. So ducks will always be near and dear to me, more so than it's not just about duck debugging. Let's see, any other ducks hiding around? The crystal duck you've seen. I think I've exhausted my normal without deep diving. I've some coffee table books about ducks in the wild, all sorts of fun. I wish everyone could have gone to the talk that Julian Connor from Grailed gave. It was, like I said, mostly in IT web science. He graduated in 2011, and just talking about his undergraduate experience and how that informed his life afterwards. Kind of being one of the early members of Venmo, and then eventually being a founder at Grailed. And the kind of just different stuff that he took advantage of in terms of while at RPI, he did a semester away at Barcelona, which was amazing. And he was definitely one of the students who always just like, was IT web science, learned Rail, and then worked with me on an independent project where he created one of the first things, like an online database, a way of going out and finding different music, scraping all kinds of different information about the EDM scene and all kinds of very specialized stuff that he was really, really interested in, and then creating that as something he used to in the end get him the job that he had at Venmo. And like I said, he was an early starter at Venmo, and then jumped from there to founding his own company and so on. So it's really kind of fun to say, look at all the different things and push yourself with your summers and learning new technology, and then applying that technology in some way that you'd never imagined that you would have in the first place. He learned Ruby at a kind of a networking company that was kind of more straight laced, traditional networking, and then as an independent study, use that technology to do something, to create this kind of crazy database of things. And then that became, and so on and so on and so on. So always be learning stuff, taking chances, trying stuff out. All right. That was, no, sorry. I keep forgetting. It doesn't, we started at 10:10 and we're going till 12 o'clock. So let's go back to, I feel like if I don't say something more about our dual Raymond controller, we should do that. All right, I'll put myself in the corner here. And so we've got here, did I ever actually successfully give him a controller? Where I got Capsule Collider 2D. He does not have. After all that typing, I didn't actually. So let's do that. So one of the key things that we're going to, of course, worry about first are getting him to walk left and right and getting him to jump. So inside of update, immediately reach for, well, I immediately set up a vector2 to be our input vector. And we're going to say vector, it should be just x equals input. We'll get it raw. That's what it's suggesting today. Amazed my migraine hasn't come back. I always tend to do that for both of them. And in this case, we're probably not going to use the vertical, but let's say we do. We're going to use fixed update. Right. Even though I'm not going to manipulate physics things necessarily, I like to use fixed update because we eliminate the problem with screen refresh rate, right? So we can get that out of the way as well. So we'll say we have a rigid body. We'll come up here in the thing we want to mostly control, of course, is going to be our rigid body 2D. And we'll just have a shortcut to it reference here. RB equals and I think I'm going to get another, I'm going to really switch into like, I got to get another keyboard. I have, in terms of my newer mechanical keyboards, I have a Corsair and I've got two Magic Eagles, and I think I can get another lit one because I sometimes I face that way and sometimes I face this way. And I've been using this wireless Logitech one, which is a great wireless controller, but I need it to be lit. And the wireless ones, their backlighting is terrible, and I don't want to like move keyboards all the time. So I'm weird like that. Okay, fixed update. We're going to say, now we can say RB dot, and now we can say velocity equals, right? Because we can't say velocity dot X, we can't say velocity dot Y. That's the challenge here. So we're going to say new vector 2, and we're going to move X in the input X, but we're going to use RB velocity Y for the Y, right? Because we're doing a platform controller. We want to control X left and right. We don't want to control up and down using Y, right? So immediately, hopefully, and I'm going to go ahead and say attach to Unity because maybe I'll be doing some debugging. And on Unity. It feels how I feel. It wants to take a nap. Okay. Wow. So I'm getting an Oculus Quest 2. I'm going to join the VR world. That's my next new thing, because I don't have enough things going on. How many do people have? Anyone got the Oculus Quest 2? They're reasonably inexpensive these days. They're about $300, which is the price of a decent, desktop gaming monitor, which is kind of neat. Not like it used to be. So our character is moving left and right, not particularly fast. He's moving at a rate of 1 meter per second, basically, right? Because it's going to be anywhere from, if I hold down the D key, it is 1, velocity is 1 in the positive direction. If I hold down A, it is negative in that direction. So probably a good idea to give it some speed, right? Some scaling to that. So we'll do a realized field. I was kind of thinking, like, maybe I'm going to separately scale speed, X and a Y. Speed vec, right? So maybe I want to independently control my speed. By default, I'm going to make it 5 and 1. And so that speed vec, come on here. Speed vec X. And speed vec Y. If I wanted to get fancy, I'll leave myself some room on that. I don't know. Now, the next thing is, of course, I want to be able to jump, right? So we're going to say bool jump. Classic. And we're going to say jump equals input dot button. And I believe jump 1, or is it just jump? So double check, go here to project. Nope, not that project. Go. Oh, sorry. Wait, was it in, where was I? Well, that's weird. That's sort of a new one. All right, my apologies on that one. That's weird. Okay, well, you're gonna lose my window in there, because we only got like 3 minutes left. So I better. All right, so quick, you can stare at this. Quick, copy this down. Write this down. Screenshot. 150%. All right, so we've got the input vector that I always use, the speed vec. Then I'm going to have independent control over the X and Y. And I'm just getting the rigid body, and I'm going to jump the jump button here, which I'm forgetting. So that's why I want to go over here and say project settings. I always find myself going back here and saying, let's look at the input manager. And remember that it's just called jump. Stupid me. Jump. And down here, we're going to say if jump. And we're going to say this is get button down. Right? If jump. We're going to say vector could be and it's going to be 0 and it's going to be 9.81. Okay, so if jump is pressed, and it's just going to be get button down, so that's going to return true the first time. And this is the odd thing where, okay, now I don't want to clear it here. We want to say if that is true, set jump to, whoops. Set jump to true. Why am I doing that? Because I don't want this to wind up getting cleared before I had a chance to actually do the jump. Right? So if jump, do that, and set jump equal false. So if they press that button, jump gets set to true, then I jump and clear it. Now, you have to split. By all means, split. And we're going to go back. I guess I didn't need to stop the debugger, but and we'll come back here. And we'll just see at least we have jump. Well, maybe we conclude with that one. All right. So then it becomes, okay, under what conditions? What do I do? You know, am I using ray casting, pointing down to say, okay, am I touching the ground? Am I colliding with the ground? Am I, you know, getting more elaborate about that? It's going to take another 10 minutes just for this, just to like reload the scripts. That's supposedly the best thing about Jonathan Blow's new stuff. It's like immediately everything happens. Just everything, just immediately. That just no waiting for anything. That'd be great. All right. So, but jump. Right, holding down jump press, which is good, and we are allowed. We can jump over Sonic. Turn around again. So the next thing to tackle, of course, is to say, okay, if we are touching the ground, right? And I'll do a quick if touching the ground for those who want to hang around. If those who don't, then. And since I get to see, well, not too many, everyone's just jumping out. I'll look forward to your projects and look forward to Game Dev 1 in the fall. Have a great summer. Oh, everybody's leaving. Just Matt, do you have any questions? Oh, you're muted. You can. I mean, I'll finish up because this is always the magic, right? When should jump be allowed, right? So. Oh yeah, yeah. It's always, you know, it's more a weightless game then, right? So, seen ones where you're allowed to jump a certain number of times, or you know, if you can jump infinitely, I guess if you jump infinitely, there's sort of no penalty. That's the question, right? So how do you still, what's the challenge to that piece of it? How do you make it a, yeah, but I bet there's, I mean, there's, think about it, use that as a thought experiment to say, well, okay, what does that exactly mean? What would that mean? Is there a way to do it and make it interesting? Just because it doesn't at first seem to be, it seems like, oh yeah, obviously we shouldn't do that. But then you have to push through it, right? There's this thing that can happen. Right? I'll be in the corner for a second. There's like, okay, anything is possible. And then so you like continue to say, okay, infinitely jump. And you're like, oh, I shouldn't be able to infinitely jump. And then suddenly it becomes obvious that you shouldn't allow that because that's just a bad thing, quote unquote. But then you sort of can push through the obvious things that become sort of like the mindset of saying, okay, platforms can't, but you have to then push through that and kind of, get yourself back to the like, well, why not? What can happen, right? It's easy to get into those modes where you've gone from, well, that's obvious the way to do it now that I know, right? Now that I know that's important, obviously it's important. You have to be on the ground. That's obvious. And now you have to push through that thinking to say, okay, maybe someone might say, well, that obviously can't work, but why? Who knows? And the person who can successfully push through that with the right answer to make it interesting, that's something new. So that's a fun one, right? Push through the obviously wrong, go through the mountain. So what I was going to do here is I'm going to do just the easiest thing. Now it's to me, it's obviously the easiest thing, as I just said, is I'm going to look at the rigid body and I'm going to look for is touching and is touching layers. This becomes a real easy, kind of hack here now. So I use the second version, is touching layers, and I just say, well, here's the layer mask, right? So I could say, layer mask dot get mask, and I'm going to give it ground and walls, or it could be just ground. So now we're going to say, if we are touching the ground, we're allowed to jump. Right. So that's even simpler than overlapping circles, I suppose. All right, so now the moment it touches down, only allowed to jump when it's touching ground. I don't really even have a grounded, don't tell anybody. This is like an even easier way to do it. I'm sure there's all sorts of instances where you want to know exactly what you're touching, how you're touching it. Are you touching from the side? You touch from the top? It's like any area. There's just so many different ways to do it. Some of them wind up, if you do it enough, exhaust enough of them, you'll come up with the ones that feel like they're, the single line version. That's like, I think that's the most concise one that I've come across with that consistently works. Using, I guess the one that seems even more obvious than this one is just the colliding with the ground and setting ground to true, but grounded isn't sort of, in that case, it's not a continuous thing. So you still need to keep track of a ground. So this is like I guess the most stateless ground check, because you're not in some state. You just happen to be touching it. And if you're touching it, you're touching it. And if not, you're not. So that's that. All right. I think that's it for today. I got to go grab a sandwich and take a nap or drink more coffee, more ibuprofen. Oh, changes the color. Where is that? Preferences, I think. And where is it? Colors. You'll see in here that there is play mode tint. So that will tint your screen when play mode is active. Yeah, that helps you from accidentally editing stuff while you're in play mode a lot. I thought we did, because I didn't know about this for quite a while as well. And I thought it was this semester that I really started consistently using it. So I thought I had mentioned it, but maybe I didn't, or somebody mentioned to me, but I'll make a note to definitely drill that into everybody to know about, because it does. Yeah, it is you learn the lesson, sort of. All right. Sound good? All right. Yep. Take care. Have a great summer and look forward to your project. All right. Bye-bye.